Hi, I'm Sean Herlihy. Um, Born in Cork and moved to Limerick when I was 5 years of age. So really spent my formative years in Limerick, primary school and secondary school. My mum was a pharmacist, my dad was an engineer, and for them, kind of our education was really, really important. And they encouraged my brother and I to do everything we could do to kind of further our education. So they really pushed us on that and curiosity, kind of just challenging things and figuring out how things worked or how they didn't work. And if you kind of went back, Ireland was an interesting place at that time of the world. So I'm really thrilled that my parents kind of got us to focus on education because that ultimately was the real bedrock and gave myself and my brother a tremendous foundation for what we could achieve in life. So after college, I decided to become a chartered accountant. God knows why, but I did. And I went and I joined what was then Stokes Kennedy Crowley, are beginning to become KPMG on Stephen's Green. And really what I found out was accounting wasn't just about numbers. So really understanding what was going on in a business. And it was a tremendous firm because we worked on just a kaleidoscope of clients. And you kind of had to know what you were doing because the more senior people in the team were continually picking the team they wanted to work on an account. And the key thing was to be on the right accounts. Because while you'd work your proverbial off, the reality was you learned an awful lot. And just the instantaneous feedback about what you were doing well and not doing well, I found brilliant and kind of created an environment in me in which I'm a huge fan of coaching, and it kind of started back in those days. So KPMG was brilliant. It was kind of every winter you slogged your guts out and did a load of really, really interesting audits. And then in the summer there could be a lot of kind of specialist type work. Because at the time there was no Boston Consulting or Bain or McKinsey in Dublin. The likelihood was if you were working for a good partner in one of the top firms, the likelihood is you would actually do a lot of really interesting projects during the course of summer. And I was lucky, got to do that. So on a flight of fancy and a whim, I sent my name and address off in an envelope to a post office box in Arlington, Virginia. And lo and behold, I won a green card to go to the US. So at short notice, I had to race back to Dublin, go to the Blackrock Clinic for chest x-ray to prove that I didn't have tuberculosis so that the Americans could grant me a green card. And so I decided to head out to Pastures New and initially joined KPMG in Silicon Valley and did a busy season there. But very quickly, I realized the main reason I went there was to get into technology. And fortunately, I managed to get in and join Oracle in 1994. And immediately, it was a different world. It was a world where business was moving incredibly quickly. Technology was being used at rates I'd never seen before. And what we see today as the internet as being a huge thing, it was only in November of 1993, that Netscape went public and suddenly realized that there was a business in being a browser for the internet. So I was at Oracle, really started to understand about the distribution of software, and in particular, software you made once, but you charged to multiple different people. That was very different to the type of businesses that I'd experienced growing up. So from there, I went on, I spent some time in Adobe Systems. Adobe Systems was, my God, they were doing some incredible creative technology. And at the time they created PDF. Today, PDF is synonymous with people who move documents around the world. Back then it was cool and new. And then I moved from there to PeopleSoft. And PeopleSoft was a company that was at the time revolutionizing human resources and payroll and things like that. And subsequently they were acquired by Oracle. So I left Oracle to go to Adobe, moved on to PeopleSoft, and very quickly I learned about technology. Big guys acquire smaller guys. And I was at PeopleSoft when we got acquired by Oracle. That was really interesting. I then moved on to a really interesting startup, small startup called Octane, which was acquired by Epiphany. Epiphany was a fantastic company in CRM. Epiphany acquired Octane just after the dot-com crash. And we're on the other side of it and starting to grow again as California started to move again after the dot-com crash. But unfortunately, we never exceeded $50 million in revenue in a quarter. We actually got to 49.1 million in a quarter. And the following quarter, we had 9/11. And 9/11 was when the world stopped. And a number of fantastic companies, everything just, the music stopped, and as a consequence, were actually effectively sold off. So Epiphany, for whom I built up all of the international part of the organization, built up international distribution through Europe, Middle East, Africa, plus Japan and Asia Pacific, I set up a number of joint ventures. Effectively, we had to sell off the joint ventures to the other partners, and all the things that we'd hoped to do weren't going to happen because ultimately, as they say, events and timing got in the way, and there was nothing we had. We didn't have the assets and the cash to hunker down and do all the things that were necessary, rather to preserve where we were. The business was sold on and continued to go from there. So out of that, you get a huge number of learnings. Technology does incredibly interesting things, but technology is a business. And the business needs to deliver remarkable value to its customers, because if it doesn't, someone else is coming up fast behind you who's going to deliver incredible value to customers. And that's one of the things I learned in the US. The most important thing is creation of customer value, communicating the customer value so the customer understands what they're getting and why it's really good. And then putting a wrapper around that customer value with fantastic people who deliver a sense of delight to the customer and continually reinforce them why they chose that particular vendor and why that vendor is the best in class. And once you do that, you do it really well. But in technology, there's no place to be third or fourth. You've got to be number one, possibly number two. But if not, you become a commodity. And that's really helped formulate my thinking about anything that you do. You got to be number one. Some things you can be number two, but you really have to be number one in any one thing you do. And then you've got to have incredible technology, incredible people, and you've got to deliver world-class customer service. Because if not, the customer's alternative options, and they will undoubtedly take those options, and you're left in the dust. So after 12 fantastic years in California, I had no plans to come back to Ireland. But I was approached by Google, who described that they were going to set up something that sounded really cool in Dublin, and would I be interested in coming back for it? I wasn't sure. So my wife and I started to do some research, and the more I looked, it's like, wow, interesting things happening over in Dublin. And very quickly I realised that the Dublin I'd come back to was fundamentally different to the Dublin that I'd left. And I realised there was a myriad and a plethora of languages. And these weren't just people who were semi-skilled who had come to Dublin. These were the cream of the crop. These were the best graduates of many of the universities across Northern and Western Europe and Northern and Western world. And I suddenly realised there was an opportunity to fundamentally change the definition of what Google was to have been. They'd originally set up with some ideas, and what we did was we were able to switch on the fly and turn this into one of the biggest revenue centres in the world. And what we did was we became the centre of excellence for building mid-market and what we call long-tail customers. So effectively, the internet provides cost-effective manners of distribution to get to large amounts of small customers. We not only proved that, but we took it and became the gold standard by which this was done in the Western world. And that ultimately was a small organisation that I joined in Dublin in late 2004, where we had about 50 people. And when I left 12 years later, there were about 5,900 people. And what I'm even more proud of is that Google has gone from strength to strength. And a series of people who I hired are now leading the business there. So I'm thrilled. It's fantastic to look at a place and to say, not only did it do well while I was there, but now that I've gone and left 5-6 years ago, it's in much better shape. They got rid of all of my silly ideas, and the quality of people I hired have taken it to new levels. So I had the lucky chance to gear off, did a lot of traveling, and eventually my wife and kids were about sick of me being at home and said, it's about time for you to get back to work. And so I was introduced to Jeff Weiner, who's the CEO of LinkedIn. Looked like a really interesting opportunity, but also an opportunity to help grow a business. So I felt it was a real giant that was sleeping in the region, and as a consequence was able to go in, make a lot of changes, and now 5 years on, we use the word within the company of EMEA on fire, the region, and we recently added Latin America to our region. So we're now Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Latin America is the fastest growing region in the company, and in large parts, the macro trends were our friend, but I managed to kind of get the right structures, the right people in place, and now what we're doing is we're taking advantage of the myriad of advantages that LinkedIn has given to us, and with the right people and structure, we're kind of racing at a faster rate than any other part of the company. So that's been a lot of fun. And so when I look at that, Dublin, Ireland has changed. It's become a tremendous location from which you can do global business, because today there are a myriad of people who have tremendous experience working across multiple markets at all different levels and who really understand scale. And when you put that together and you acquire and you use capital correctly to provide a really strong technology platform, you've the right go-to-market strategy with the appropriate people, Dublin is an incredible location to do that force march of scale from and to grow into all aspects of the region. And that's really what I've been doing for the last 20 plus years. I really care about helping great people achieve their potential. Actually, not just achieve their potential, just blow right through it and achieve more than they hoped was possible. Why? A couple of people helped me as I was developing my career. And it was that honest, candid, at times bloody harsh feedback that helped me deal with reality and understand the fact that I either had a mistaken view of reality or the fact that I was not behaving in a way that was helping my career. So I'm really focused on basically identifying great people and then helping them achieve their potential. Because if great people achieve their potential and a number of great people achieve their potential together, you have a hell of a team, and that's unbeatable. So how do I think about that? I think about continually hiring great people. I kind of see it as hiring people better than me, because once I do that, I make the business better. Once I make the business better, they help people around them to be even better. But it also helps me because it pulls me and helps me rise along. So I'm a huge believer in hiring better. I continually go out and look for people who are better than me at X, Y, or Z, sometimes at X and Y and Z. Because ultimately, I'm always targeted with leaving the organization in place that was better than the organization that was here when I got here. And that's what I've tried to do in all the companies that I've been in. And that sometimes means just been going out and getting people that I know are better than me and are going to take what I thought was a good job, and 3 months later are going to say I'm embarrassed by the job I did because they've taken it to a complete new level. But when you hire those great people and they work and collaborate and innovate and use agile thinking, what you're doing is you're fostering leaders throughout the organization. And then everybody starts to see this is how we move forward. This is the type of transparent organization where I can ask really hard questions. When I'm asking a really hard question about an issue, someone who knows more about the issue is going to help me understand what's the right answer. And then they're going to point out to me somebody else in the organization that if I collaborate with, together we're going to come up with an even better answer. So that's what I care about, because I believe companies are built on the shoulders of giants. And those giants are great people who are achieving incredible amounts. And sometimes with all of us, and I'll talk about myself, sometimes it's getting out of our own way. And sometimes somebody can help us to get out of our own way. So I greatly care about hiring great people, enabling them to achieve more than they'd hoped, and often it is about helping them get out of their own way, work with great people, foster collaboration, generate incredible teamwork, and then what they do is they leave layer upon layer of leadership within the business, so that no matter what happens, the business continues forward and is in the hands of strong safeguards and stewards of the business who can innovate, take the business in new directions, and ultimately the business self-perpetuates. Because I think that's the responsibility of a leader. You need to leave in place people who are better than you, who can actually bring the company to even more success. And that should be what we take pride in. And that's something that I take a huge amount of pride in. So actually, COVID has actually really helped me reassess. But more importantly, I haven't been on a plane since the first week of March. And do you know what? Initially, I thought it was going to be terrible. I've actually enjoyed it. Why? Because I've been able to spend more time just on a few personal things. I played a little bit more golf this year. But I think more importantly, I've been able to re-establish connection with key family members and be in a position to help out on a couple of family issues that in the past I've probably just been flittingly in and out of and haven't really helped as much as I could have. So from my point of view, one of the side benefits is I think I've actually rebuilt a series of relationships with some extended family members because I've actually had the brilliant opportunity to spend more time with them. And that's been fantastic. Other than that, I wish we could get a vaccine, get the kids back to school, because I really worry about the kids and especially kind of late teenagers, early 20-year-olds, really not quite sure what's going on and feeling that life is passing them by. That would be my one wish, that we could kind of resolve that for them. Boy, are we in the age of disruption. Now, the word disruption kind of freaks a lot of people out. I know, because over the last 10 years, I've been talking to people about why you have to disrupt yourself before someone disrupts you. And as you can imagine, the lad from Limerick telling people to go disrupt themselves, you can imagine just the smart comments that I receive in reply. Well, I think along comes COVID. And this is probably the only positive thing I'm going to say about COVID. But COVID basically forced disruption on people, and things that we've been hoping to happen, like digitalization, have been made happen by COVID. For example, companies that had been thinking about could they offer remote work and weren't sure, suddenly had to move to 100% remote work. And what happened? The technology platform stayed up. When you think about it, we've all moved to using, whether it be video conferencing, and there are multiple formats of it today. But other than we have smart jokes of can you hear me, etc., nobody's complaining that their video conferencing doesn't hold up. The people are now used to using video conferencing. Our broadband's held up. So in many ways, the technical infrastructure that's been put together over the last 15 to 20 years is really, really strong. And what was happening was we as humans were holding up the move towards that. And along came COVID. And so in many ways, it speeded it up. And so we're now going to have to think about what it means for the future. Because that whole area of disruption, a pandemic has come about and provided one form of disruption. And I suspect underneath the surfaces of many of the industries that are out there, there's other disruption taking place. And because we're so focused on COVID, we're missing some of the other things. For example, the restaurant industry. I see so many of the successful restaurants now kind of figuring out how to basically act as a kitchen, and then people come and pick up something that may be 80 to 90% complete and they finish it themselves. E-commerce has happened. My mother in her 80s ordered a Chromebook off e-commerce because she can't go to an electrical store to figure out what she's going to do. I got to tell you, I did not think it would happen in my lifetime that my mother would embrace e-commerce. But it's amazing what happens when necessity forces you to do something. And I think that's what we have to think about. That COVID was the forcing function on a series of disruptions, but I think underneath all of the surfaces and all of the industries that we're in, there's more disruption taking place. I think all of us, I suspect each and every one of us have used our card to pay far more than we've used cash. And many people who thought they'd never use a card were aghast at the thought of contactless payments now embrace it because of the health benefits. And so they're the things I'm thinking about, that underneath the surface there are a lot of things happening, and what we have to do as a company is be incredibly sharp at thinking about what's going on and what does it mean for our industry. And what we have to do is we have to take what are individual pieces of data today and create patterns out of them, because a trend of tomorrow is a data point of today. And the best companies are the ability to see those data points, move them into patterns, and get ahead of the trends. Because once you allocate your capital in advance of the herd moving in, you get a disproportionate return, but also you move faster. Setting yourself up as someone or a company who can predict the future, that's a damn dangerous game. It's easy to get wrong. But on the other hand, you have to try and anticipate where things are going. So how I think about it is you have to be agile. You have to be incredibly innovative, and you have to collaborate like hell. So agile. I think today fast beats slow. We used to see that the biggest companies in the world would dominate the smaller companies. Today what we're seeing is that the fastest beat the slowest. Because the fastest can embrace change, can embrace technology to do things that aren't a competitive advantage of theirs and make them into competitive advantages, so they go out there and do remarkable things. I think when you're agile, you can grasp opportunities and you're not a prisoner of the past. Sometimes agility, in a way, is that freedom to move away from, a traditional way of thinking, to look at things in a completely different way and to grasp hold of those opportunities. And it's about reallocating your resources. A lot of times we think we have these kind of annual planning type processes and we put resources in an area and nothing will change. Fast companies plan on the fly, incredibly agile, because if they see a data point which they start to see a pattern and they know they need to change where the resources are and to move them into a different part of the business. And so for me, that element of agility, it's really about being ahead of the competition and going ahead of them all the time. The key thing is to be ahead, but once you're ahead, to start thinking like you're behind and to go a step further and a step further and a step further. And agility for me is a trait that enables companies to move incredibly quickly and to take opportunities. So collaboration. Collaboration is one of these words that, a lot of people raise their eyes to, and it's like, oh God, is this kind of American nonsense? I'm a huge believer is when you collaborate, that means you're working with other people. And when you're working with like-minded people who have incredibly high standards and they hold you to those standards, they make you better. But I actually think that no company or no one person has all the answers. So a large part of collaboration is kind of widening your circle of influence. So you're getting input from people who can actually collaborate with you to get the best answer. Because I think if you have the best answer, it's more likely you'll have a better product or service. And the likelihood is no one person knows all about it. In the technology industry, we use an awful lot of tests and pilots of our customers. And we kind of try and figure that out. And really what we're doing is we're collaborating with thousands or hundreds of thousands of users to tell us what potentially millions or billions of people might want. And so what we've just done is we've industrialized the speed at which we collaborate. Because if we move incredibly quickly with the most feedback possible, it's highly likely we're going to have a great product or service. I think the other thing that you need from a collaboration point of view is today, employees they expect a lot more for their employers. They expect to know what's going on, and they expect the truth to be shared with them at all points in time. So transparency is basically the manifestation of collaboration between companies and their employees. Hugely, hugely important. And then you put all that together, so you've got, you're getting a lot more people involved in your design. You're being remarkably transparent with your employees. You put that together, I think you make more intelligent decisions for your customers. You're putting your customer in the center of your universe. When you make better decisions for them, you're giving them a better product. You're probably putting better services around them, and you're actually selling to them at the right price. And so that's why I think the second kind of trait of winning today is collaboration. The final piece I'd like to talk about is innovation. I always talk about innovation rather than invention. Because innovation isn't about creating something new. Sometimes it's taking something that's already existing and making it a hell of a lot better. I was lucky to join Google in the early stages of search. It's actually a big surprise to me when I learned that actually Google didn't invent search. They just made it a hell of a lot better than anybody else who was there. You start to look at that. Apple didn't invent the mobile phone. Somebody else did. Who they are, who knows? But Apple has been remarkably successful at it. And so the key thing in all of this is to innovate across services. You don't need to invent, you don't need to be the first person there. But the key things to understand is how you make it better, and to be maniacally focused on making things better every day of the week. So whether it's a product or whether it's a service, the key thing is that you never stop innovating. That you innovate about every potential aspect, because you know that people can compete against you on 100 domains, 100 different parts of a product or service. And what you have to do is to break it down, and you're out innovating on every single aspect of that. And once you're in that position, I think you're in a position to drive huge change. And that change, properly structured for your customer, drives incredible value. When you drive value for the customer, they're going to give you a greater share of their spend. If they're giving you a greater share of their spend, you're becoming more of a trusted advisor. Once you're becoming a trusted advisor, they're giving you inklings into where they're going, which helps you to design better products and services, so it becomes a virtuous circle. So for me, I think the three things I'm continually trying to stay ahead of is agility, collaboration, and innovation. Those three together, I think, can help Cairn win in the rest of the 21st century.